Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a world of damp wool, smoky thatch, and the constant danger of catching something lethal from a spoon. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where peasants work from sunup to sundown, castles aren't nearly as glamorous as they sound, and you, my friend, are about to find out exactly how unprepared you are for any of it. Hope you're not too attached to the concept of personal comfort, because tonight's adventure includes everything from insect-riddled beds to morning routines that would make your worst camping trip feel like a spa weekend. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's still awake across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up coughing. The air in your cottage is dense with smoke from the fireplace, even though the fire's long gone out. No chimney, just a hole in the roof that doubles as both vent and a charming entrance for crows. Your bed is straw stuffed in a cloth sack, though half the sack is torn open and some sort of beetle is nesting inside. You flick it off your leg, but not before it leaves a little something behind. Is that a rash already? Your breath fogs in the morning chill. It's late spring, but in this part of England, or France, or somewhere equally soggy, it never really gets warm. There's no glass in the window, just shutters that let in more cold than light. The floor is dirt, and you sleep next to your goats, who've taken turns snoring louder than you. One of them licks your foot, and honestly, that's the closest thing to affection you will get all day. Your first task? Get the fire going again. You fumble around in the semi-dark for yesterday's embers and blow gently. Nothing. You blow harder. Still nothing. A few sparks, some ash in your eye. Eventually, after half an hour, you get it. Just in time to boil water for the world's most disappointing breakfast. There's a small pot near the hearth with a film of something growing on top. That's yesterday's pottage. You scrape off the layer of mold, stir it with a stick, and add a scoop of barley flour and a few nettles. Congratulations, you've made medieval oatmeal. It smells faintly of socks. To drink, you've got ale. Everyone drinks ale, even children, because the water might kill you. It's weak ale, brewed at home with questionable hops and a strong tang of sour bread. You grimace but drink it. You'll need the calories. No cutlery. You eat with a wooden spoon, one spoon shared by everyone in your household. You wipe it on your tunic before using it, which counts as sanitation. Somewhere under your left foot, the floor squelches. You decide not to think about what's buried beneath the straw mat. You step outside and the world greets you with a nose full of pig. The neighbor's sow has escaped again and is rooting through your tiny garden. You try to shoo her away, but she's bigger than you and not afraid to squeal loudly until her owner, your neighbor, drunk already, comes out and shoos you instead. You back away apologetically. You can't afford a feud. This is the kind of town where grudges get passed down generations and someone burns your roof over a bad harvest trade. As you bend down to tie your shoe, wait, no shoelaces here. Your shoes are more like leather sacks tied with bits of old rope, and they've soaked through already from morning dew. Your feet are cold, damp, and covered in little cuts from yesterday's walk through brambles. You swat at a fly and feel a squelch. Flee. That's normal. You've likely got 100 living on you right now. Everyone does. And lice. And probably a few ticks too. Personal hygiene in this age is less about soap and more about ignoring the itch until you're bleeding. Let's pause for a moment and really breathe this in. The air outside smells like a blend of livestock, moldy wood, and something that might be a dead rat under someone's porch. It's not even that people don't bathe. They do, occasionally. But the concept of daily shower is centuries away, and soap is a luxury. Bathhouses exist, but they're rare, scandalous, and sometimes serve as informal dating venues, if you catch my drift. You won't be going to one. You'll be using rainwater in a barrel and hoping no one else is watching. You hear a bell, church bell, time to head to work. You're not a noble, you're not even a merchant. You're a peasant, though they wouldn't have used that term. You're just someone who works the land that someone else owns. Your rent is paid in crops and labor, which means most of your waking hours are spent feeding someone wealthier than you. You walk past your landlord's manor, a wooden structure with a stone foundation, lavish by local standards, and avoid eye contact with the steward outside. He looks at you the way one might look at something stuck to a shoe. Your job today, dung spreading, not metaphorically. You'll be helping cart human and animal waste across fields as fertilizer. The smell follows you like a second skin. Gloves? Don't be ridiculous. You'll use your bare hands and wash them later in a stream that also serves as a laundry basin, a drinking hole for animals, and occasionally a latrine. As you work, you see other villagers beginning their routines. One woman is churning butter by hand in a wooden pail that's never been truly cleaned. A boy is skinning a rabbit with a stone knife. An old man is talking to himself while weaving baskets, his teeth black from years of chewing herbs for non-existent pain relief. You think about lunch. Don't get excited. It's another bowl of pottage, maybe with a dried onion added if you're lucky. Meat is rare. If you have a pig, it's for winter. Chickens lay eggs, but you trade most of them for other goods. A stolen turnip might brighten your day, but only if you don't get caught. One local woman was punished for stealing cabbages last year. She spent 3 days tied to a post in the square while kids threw old bread at her. You glance at your hands, already raw. Your nails are blackened with grime. You itch constantly. You try not to think about what's crawling beneath your shirt. And yet, life goes on. You hear a baby cry somewhere. Someone laughs, really laughs, probably at a crude joke about cow udders. A traveling peddler clinks by with beads and bells and fabric so bright it hurts your eyes. You stare at it longingly. Color like that is rare here. Your tunic is grayish-brown. Everyone's is. It used to be another color, maybe, but the sun and dirt have long since erased it. Historians still argue whether most medieval peasants were truly miserable or simply adapted to a lower standard of comfort. There are accounts of dancing, festivals, and moments of joy. There are also accounts of starvation, and entire villages disappearing during plagues. Both are true, and here you are, caught in the middle, scratching your flea bites, sipping sour ale, and hoping today isn't the day the pigs decide to revolt. By sundown, your muscles ache, your eyes sting, and you've probably got a mild case of trench foot, but you've survived your morning, barely. Tomorrow might bring rain, or a feast day, or a tax collector demanding grain you don't have. For now, you head back to your smoke-stained hut and sit on a log, watching the sky slowly turn the color of old tin. And you think this was just the beginning. You step outside after a long, muddy morning only to realize nature is calling. And in the Middle Ages, nature answers in the most inconvenient way possible. There's no bathroom in your tiny one-room hut, of course, not even an outhouse. Just a bucket in the corner behind a modest curtain, which, judging by the smell, hasn't been emptied in a few days. You could use it, or you could borrow the village latrine. You decide you'd rather risk the outdoors. So you wrap your threadbare cloak tighter and head off down a narrow path between dwellings. The latrine is technically a communal trench dug out behind the pig pen, partially screened by some hay bales and a half-rotted plank wall. A few people are already there, doing their business and making awkward eye contact with anyone who passes. You shuffle past quickly, wondering who thought it was a good idea to place the latrine so close to where the pigs sleep and eat. You crouch. It's cold. It's damp. It's exactly what you'd expect from a place shared by an entire village and maintained by nobody. You finish your business and try not to breathe through your nose. Toilet paper? Adorable idea. You get moss, or if you're lucky, leftover fabric scraps. And let's just say not all moss is gentle. And then you realize your mistake. You stood up too fast. You slipped. Your heel lands in something not so solid and very unpleasantly warm. You now have medieval excrement up the side of your foot wraps. You sit there blinking, absorbing the moment, and just mutter softly to yourself, people romanticize this era, why exactly? You wash your feet in a shallow stream on the way back, which unfortunately is also where laundry gets done and horses sometimes drink. The water is full of floating vegetable peels, reeds, and things you're not emotionally prepared to identify. You try to scrub off the worst of it with a wet rock and a prayer. By the time you return to your hovel, the place is awake with noise. A neighbor is sharpening a scythe on a whetstone that squeals like a ghost every time it drags across the blade. Children run barefoot through mud, laughing, until one trips and face plants into a puddle. No one rushes to help. They just sort of glance over and move on. That's parenting here. You survive, or you don't. You notice the town swineherd limping down the lane. He's wearing a tunic so patched it resembles a mosaic and holding a bucket of sour milk. He nods to you and grunts. That's considered polite. You nod back, trying to ignore the flies swarming his beard. Now that you've emptied your guts and washed your feet, it's time for hygiene. You've heard rumors of something called a toothbrush from faraway lands, but around here, you chew on a stick. Literally, a frayed twig known as a chew stick is the closest thing to dental care. You scrape your teeth with it and spit into the fire. There's no minty freshness, just the taste of birch and desperation. You might also rinse your mouth with salt water or rub ashes on your teeth. The theory is that abrasiveness equals cleanliness. The reality is that everyone's breath smells like sour cabbage and fermented barley, including yours. Bathing? Not today, not tomorrow either, maybe once every few weeks. You might heat some water in a large cauldron, then sit in it like soup. But firewood is scarce and warm baths are a luxury. Most people make do with a quick splash from a bucket, using cold water and a rough cloth. The word refreshing never comes up. Hair care. If you're lucky, you have a comb. If you're normal, you don't. Lice are just a fact of life. People swap stories of the worst infestations like war veterans trading battle tales. Sometimes a friar might come through and offer you a strange-smelling oil to rub into your scalp. Good against nits, he says, also possibly curses. You pretend to believe him because hope is the only real medicine. Your clothes? You slept in them. You work in them. You will probably die in them. They're made of rough wool or linen if you're lucky, dyed with natural substances like onion skin or urine. No joke. They itch constantly, and the seams rub raw against your underarms and thighs. Underwear isn't standard for most folks. If you wear any at all, it's just a square of cloth tied in place like an oversized diaper. And then comes the daily ritual of removing pests. You sit by the firelight and pick through your clothes looking for lice and fleas. A neighbor comes by and does the same. You exchange casual banter about the weather while squishing bugs between your fingernails. It's almost intimate. Someone might even offer to delouse your back. That's friendship. This is when you realize something that'll haunt you all day. Your skin never feels clean. It always feels like it's wearing something invisible. Grime, smoke, oil, sweat. And when the sun hits your face, it just makes you itch. At this point, you might think, surely nobles lived better? Maybe, but even in castles, the bathrooms were buckets, privies, holes in stone walls that dropped straight into a moat. Castles stank too. People used perfumes to mask the smell, not to remove it. And the servants? Well, they were just peasants in better clothes. Their job might involve emptying chamber pots from the Great Hall or wiping a baron's backside with sheepskin. A high honor, some say. You don't buy it. Historians still argue whether the average medieval person was actually dirtier than modern people or just had different standards. There's evidence that people wanted to be clean but lacked the resources. Monks bathed more often. Nobles occasionally bathed in scented waters. But for most, dirt was part of life. You walk into the village center to see a man selling lye soap made with pig fat. He offers you a bar for the price of a whole chicken. You stare, insulted. You don't have a whole chicken. You'll just keep using that old ash bucket back home. Maybe mix in some mint leaves if you're feeling fancy. You pass by the town well, where someone's drawing water with a frayed rope and a wooden bucket full of green slime. You ask if the water is fresh, and she shrugs. Fresher than yesterday, she says. At midday, your sweat has dried into your tunic, leaving stiff salt stains. You stink, but everyone else does too. You see a priest nearby, his robes yellowed and stained. Even God's servants aren't immune to the grime. You scratch at a bite, probably a flea, maybe a spider, possibly the beginning of something worse. You try not to think about it. There's no doctor, just a local wise woman, and her cure for everything involves boiling nettles and mumbling over the steam. Finally, you stumble back to your hut. The sun is high. You've survived another segment of medieval life, and your reward is another bowl of lukewarm pottage. It tastes like it always does, sour, gritty, and vaguely of turnip. You sit in the shade, chewing your stick again, trying to clean your molars. A rooster nearby screeches like it's being murdered. That's just its voice. And you think with one day down, many, many dirty ones to go, you think breakfast might cheer you up. It will not. It's not even breakfast as you know it, more like the first edible thing you shovel into your mouth before the sun gets too high and your day becomes one long, sweaty punishment. Today, your morning meal is barley bread. Again, you're pretty sure the flour is mostly grain and partly whatever crawled into the bag and died. It's dense, it's dry. It could double as a weapon in a tavern brawl. You chew and chew and chew. The crust fights you back. There's no jam, of course, no butter, just the taste of sour, gritty barley and a hint of mildew. At least the mold adds some color, like green sprinkles if you squint and have no standards. On the table, really just a wide board resting on 2 barrels, is a bowl of boiled cabbage. It's been reheated 3 times. The smell is borderline chemical warfare. You try to eat quickly so you don't have to inhale too much, but it clings to your nose like damp wool. And then comes the beer. Not the refreshing kind that comes with foam and a pretzel. This is small beer, barely fermented, just strong enough to kill off whatever lived in the water. Everyone drinks it, men, women, kids, grandma, not because they want to be buzzed before breakfast, but because medieval water is a gamble you rarely win. It's cloudy, slightly warm, and tastes like it's seen things. You sip slowly and try not to gag. Your host, because let's pretend you're visiting a peasant family, since having your own house was already a miracle, offers a bit of cheese. You feel hopeful, until you realize it's hard, waxy, and smells like feet. Actually, it is feet. Someone stepped on it during yesterday's scuffle with the goat. You pretend you're full and tuck it into your sleeve to save for later. Of course, if you were wealthy, your breakfast might include things like roasted pigeon, fresh fruit, or bread made with wheat instead of barley. But you are not wealthy. You are extremely not wealthy. You are, I barter onions for old socks. Poor. So you make do. You watch a child gnaw on what might be a turnip, or possibly a rock. Someone else chews the rind off a dried apple. A dog nearby finds a dead mouse and eats better than any of you. This is breakfast in the Middle Ages. It's not a meal, it's a survival checkpoint. You remember someone once mentioning spices, pepper, cinnamon, exotic things from the East, but you've never seen them. Maybe your Lord has. Maybe he sprinkles something fancy on his eggs. But you haven't even seen an egg since spring. The bread scrapes the roof of your mouth. You check your molars with your tongue. One of them is loose. You ignore it. If it falls out, it falls out. There's no dentist, no toothpaste, no hope. Historians still argue whether medieval people they actually suffered from chronic malnutrition or just cyclical shortages. The answer seems to be yes, especially in years when crops failed or livestock got sick. You don't eat well and you don't eat enough. That weak ale, it's probably the most nourishing thing in your diet. A buzzing fly lands on your bread. You wave it off and take another bite anyway. You're past the point of being picky. And yet, for all the hardship, breakfast is a social affair. You're all in this together, scraping burnt bits from the bowl, dunking dry bread in cabbage water, and joking about how bad it tastes. You laugh when someone bites into a rock-hard bean. You pretend not to notice the worm in your neighbor's onion. There's a moment, just a sliver of time, when the firelight dances on soot-blackened walls and someone sings a half-remembered tune from a festival 2 summers ago. And it's oddly cozy, not clean, not comfortable, but human. Then the village bell rings. Again. And it's time to go. You wrap up the rest of your breakfast, a slab of congealed fat, and head outside. The sun has climbed higher, and with it, the stench. Morning dew has evaporated, releasing every trapped smell, manure, smoke, unwashed humans, and the occasional decomposing rat. You see a traveling peddler arriving, cart rattling behind him. He sells old pots, combs, and stale honey cakes. You consider trading a spoon for one, but you only have 1 spoon. Everyone only has 1 spoon. You sigh and move on. You pass the baker's hut. He's wealthy by peasant standards, owns an actual oven, But his bread is expensive and made with wheat. That's noble food. You peek inside and smell something incredible. Yeast, wood smoke, maybe even dried rosemary. You nearly cry. Then he notices you and slams the door. So you wander down to the communal oven where your barley loaves have been resting in the warm ashes. You dig one out, burnt on the outside, raw in the middle. You try to fix it by stabbing it with a stick and roasting it like a marshmallow over a fire. It helps, a little. A few children are playing nearby with bones, actual bones. One of them throws a pig femur at the others like it's a ball. They squeal with joy. You just shake your head and keep walking. You still have one chore before lunch, collecting eggs from the village hens, assuming the hens didn't escape. Again, the hen house is more co-op than house. Just a mess of boards, sticks, and old straw. You crawl inside and immediately regret it. Something smells dead. You find 3 eggs, 1 cracked. You slip them into your pouch and pray they don't break before noon. Protein is rare. These eggs are currency. Then you see your cousin. He's chewing something. You ask what? He grins and says, "Beetle." You laugh. You hope he's joking. Finally, you slump down under the shade of a tree near the fields, chew the last of your dry bread, and try to ignore the grumbling in your stomach. It's almost midday, and you've had 400 calories and several flavor-based regrets. But guess what? It's better than what some folks get. In times of famine, say after a harsh winter or when bandits torch the fields, this meal would be a memory. People ate bark, leather, even dirt, and in desperate moments, much worse. There are records, vague but chilling, of cannibalism during the worst famines. You look down at your barley brick and suddenly feel very lucky. So you finish chewing and lick your fingers clean because wasting crumbs is a sin. The bell rings again. Work calls. The field, the garden, the neighbor's cart that needs pushing. Your stomach groans, but you stand. Because breakfast is over, and the next chance to eat is many aching hours away. You squint into the sun, step off the path, and your foot sinks into something wet. That's not mud, it's a mystery. And unfortunately, mystery goop is a permanent feature of medieval roads. Welcome to your commute. There are no sidewalks, no cobblestones unless you live in a city, and even then it's more broken stone than smooth street. Most village roads are just dirt, turned to slush in winter, dust in summer, and pure misery the rest of the time. Every step is a gamble. Your foot wraps are soaked. Again. Your toes pruned like boiled turnips. You're headed to the fields now because you're a peasant, and peasants don't get days off unless they're dead or it's Sunday. Even saints don't save you from manual labor if the wheat needs scything. You've got a rusty hoe slung over your shoulder and a coil of twine that's frayed like your nerves. Behind you, a goose is screaming at absolutely nothing. Typical. As you trudge along the rutted path, a donkey lumbers past dragging a cart of manure. The driver nods, then sneezes directly into his hand and wipes it on his tunic. You instinctively give him 5 feet of distance. Social distancing, medieval edition. You pass the edge of the village, marked by a leaning post with someone's old shoe nailed to the top. Local superstition says it keeps spirits out. It does not. You swear the air just got colder. Now the countryside opens before you, and it would be beautiful. Rolling hills, bird calls, patches of green. But the scent of dung wafts on the breeze, and a distant scream reminds you someone just stepped on a rake. Again. You're not alone. Other villagers are making their way to the fields too. One man pushes a wheelbarrow filled with turnip seedlings. Another woman carries a basket of tools and a toddler. Yes, she's farming and babysitting. Multitasking isn't trendy here. It's survival. You arrive at your assigned plot, a strip of land that you technically don't own, but are allowed to work in exchange for giving most of your harvest to the local lord. Feudalism, baby. You own nothing and everything hurts. The ground is dry and cracked from last week's sun, but the morning dew has made the top layer slick. You sink your hoe into the dirt, and immediately a cloud of gnats rises up and bites you in the face. You wave them away with a curse that probably hasn't been invented yet. No one hears, or maybe they're just used to it. Your job this morning is to weed again, because if weeds choke your barley, you won't eat this winter. It's not extra credit, It's the difference between food and famine. You kneel, dirt grinding into your knees, and begin the slow, hateful process of ripping out crabgrass, thistles, and the occasional angry worm. Behind you, someone coughs, not a polite cough, a deep, wet cough that sounds like it's trying to leave the person permanently. You glance over, it's your cousin. He's been sick for weeks. Might be consumption, might be nothing. You both shrug. There's no doctor. If he dies, you inherit his turnip patch. And then someone else calls out, "Rat!" A few villagers jump up and chase the creature with sticks. It darts under a pile of hay and disappears. That's the fifth one this week. They're getting bold. You reach for your water flask, just a wooden cup wrapped in leather. The water is warm and tastes faintly of iron, but it's something. You take a sip and then dump a little on your head. Instantly, dirt becomes mud on your scalp. Congratulations. You're now a clay sculpture of yourself. It's nearly noon when you spot a rider in the distance. Horse, shining armor, billowing red tabard. Must be a messenger, or worse, the tax collector. You try to look busy. Everyone around you suddenly redoubles their efforts, hoeing faster, louder, like noise will keep them safe. The rider doesn't stop, just gallops through the path, splashing mud and ignoring peasants like you as if you were part of the road. Classic noble behavior. A woman near you mutters something unflattering about his horse's parentage. You smirk. You'll remember that line for later. Suddenly you hear bells. Not the church bell. Cowbells. You turn and see one of the village's prize oxen loose and charging down the field. A small boy hangs off its tail, yelling. Behind him, the herdsman waves a stick with absolutely zero control. The ox barrels through a row of cabbages, flips a cart, and eventually stops to chew on someone's apron. Just another Tuesday. You go back to work. Pull, toss, wipe sweat, repeat. By mid-afternoon, your hands are blistered. Your back has stiffened into a shape only a chiropractor, if those existed, could love. You pause for a moment, lean against the fence, and stare at your dirty nails. You've got grime embedded in your fingerprints. Congratulations. You are now a medieval artifact in the making. Still, you glance around and see others working just as hard. A mother teaches her 6-year-old how to spot weeds from crops. An old man in rags hums a hymn while planting peas. A teenager throws stones at a raven that's stolen half his beans. Life continues. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had time for leisure. Some records suggest they had dozens of holy days off each year, feast days, saint days, festivals. But others argue that when you factor in daily survival, labor wasn't confined to the fields. Spinning thread, making clothes, repairing tools, those things took time too. Rest? Only if you had no livestock, no lord, no children, and no bad luck. In other words, never. A cart rolls by filled with manure. Again, this time it hits a bump and sprays a little. You leap back just in time. The man driving it laughs. You do not. By late afternoon, you're spent. The sun is lower, the air cooler. You've pulled weeds, chased birds, stepped on thorns, and found a rock shaped like a pig's face. You tuck it in your pouch. Maybe you'll trade it for a plum. As you walk back through the village, tired and aching, you pass a woman boiling rags in a pot of lye. You nod. She nods. The cloth turns gray. You wonder if it's yours. You reach your hut and collapse onto a bench. The day isn't over, but you've made it through the part where you're most likely to be trampled, poisoned, or taxed into oblivion. Dinner will be terrible. The lice haven't taken the night off, and you're almost out of chew sticks. But for now, you can sit and breathe and let the silence soak into your bones. You sit half slumped, trying not to inhale too deeply through your nose, because everything around you smells like sweat, manure, and damp wool. And suddenly you hear it. Hooves, big ones, and clanking armor. Uh-oh, your muscles tense like a rabbit about to bolt. But you don't run, you don't even stand. You do what every self-preserving medieval peasant does when they hear the approach of someone wealthy and armed. You avert your eyes and look small. Looking small is a survival skill here. You practice it often. A mounted knight trots into the village square, his banner flapping in the breeze, chainmail catching the light. Everyone drops what they're doing. Some kneel. Others bow deeply. You try to do both, which results in a graceless lurch forward and a knee in a puddle of pig drool. The knight dismounts and calls for the village reeve, a sort of local manager who reports directly to the lord. The reeve hobbles out, his spine curved like a fishing hook from too many years bent over accounts and livestock. They exchange words. You can't hear most of it, but you do hear this. New levies. Great. More taxes. Feudalism isn't just a fun word in history books. It's the structure you live and die under. Land belongs to the Lord, not you. Even your own oxen technically belong to him. You pay rent in grain, labor, and obedience. If the Lord's son wants to use your cart, guess what? You don't have a cart anymore. And don't get too comfortable with your patch of dirt. If the Lord decides to give it to someone else, perhaps as a wedding gift or just because he doesn't like your face that week, tough luck. You're out, homeless, probably excommunicated for good measure. You remember the tale of a man 2 villages over who spoke out against his landlord. His house mysteriously burned down. Then he was fined for being homeless. Coincidence? Historians still argue whether lords wielded this much personal power or whether peasant life had more negotiation than modern minds assume. But from where you're standing, with soggy knees and a nearly empty belly, it sure feels like you have zero say. You shuffle off as the knight tosses a silver coin to a nearby child who catches it like it's the Holy Grail. Then the child's mother snatches it away before he can lose it in the mud. Survival tip: never let a toddler handle money when you're living one bad harvest away from starvation. As you make your way back to the hut, a man walks by with a yoke over his shoulders and 2 sloshing buckets of something unidentifiable. He nods. You nod. You both pretend your backs don't feel like they've been hammered flat by fate. Inside, your host family is already discussing what today's announcement might mean. They'll want more barley, someone mutters, or a pig. You glance at the family pig, who is staring blankly at the wall and chewing something that looks like part of a shoe. Poor guy. He doesn't know he's rent. Then comes the worst part of feudal life, the ceremony of groveling. Every so often, especially when taxes are due or gossip says the Lord is in a foul mood, the villagers are summoned to the manor. It's not a party, it's a formality where you bow, offer goods, and remind the Lord how grateful you are not to be starving to death in somebody else's mud. So you dress up, which means you wipe the dried egg yolk off your tunic, scrape the worst of the mud off your legs with a stick, and try to hide the lice bites with your hood. You walk with the others to the edge of the Lord's estate. It's big, impressive, a proper manor with a stone foundation and even a tiny stained glass window, luxuries you only read about in whispered stories, since you can't read. A steward opens the wooden doors and sniffs disapprovingly as the scent of 50 peasants wafts in. You line up. You wait. Someone sneezes and is glared at like they committed treason. When your turn comes, you bow, deeply, the kind of bow that nearly knocks your forehead into the dirt. Then you present your offering, 3 scrawny onions and a goose feather, and mumble something about loyalty and divine order. The Lord, seated in a carved chair and wearing something that might be velvet, barely looks at you. He waves a ringed hand. You step back. No eye contact. You breathe again only once you are outside. Back in the village, people grumble quietly but never too loud. A boy asks why the Lord needs so much food when he doesn't farm. His mother hisses at him to hush. You remember the woman who asked that once and was accused of heresy? She's still in the stocks. Speaking of stocks, your village square has a fresh addition. Someone's been caught stealing bread. He's been locked in the wooden frame, arms and head poking through. Kids throw old turnips at him. It's more entertainment than punishment at this point. You toss a soft one gently. As night approaches, the manor bell rings again. Supper for the Lord. You get reminded by scent, roast meat, herbs, and fresh bread all carried downwind. You bite your tongue. You still have half a beet and a sprig of something that might be parsley. You'll dine like a king, a very sass a hungry king. You head back to your hut under the bruised purple sky. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls. Someone whispers about witches. You walk faster. Inside, the fire is low. The youngest child is asleep under a sack. A teenager is weaving new sandals from old rope and cursing the knots. Your host is picking lice from his collar. And you sit, thinking about that night, that manor, that glint of silver in the dirt. Life under a lord is like living on a tightrope stretched over a pit full of hungry dogs. And the rope is fraying. You're constantly working, constantly owing, constantly scraping by. And yet, you survive. For now. You chew your parsley, sniff your beet, and wonder if anyone ever liked being a peasant. Probably not. But maybe, just maybe, they liked their neighbors, their songs, their stolen moments of laughter around a crackling fire. And so you lie down once again on your flea-bitten mat, stomach half full, heart half heavy, and prepare to do it all again tomorrow. You step out into the morning fog and see her, the sobbing woman from next door. She's clutching a bundle, tiny, still, wrapped in cloth. You look away. Infant mortality is part of life, a brutal, unspoken fact. A third of children don't make it past their 5th birthday. Some don't make it past birth. There's no midwife today. She's in another village tending to a difficult labor. And even if she were here, there's little she could do beyond prayers, cloths, and boiled water. The woman rocks back and forth. Her husband stands nearby, hollow-eyed, holding a shovel. No one says anything. You all just know. The little body will be buried behind their hut. No marker, no ceremony, just soft earth and grief swallowed whole. And this is only the beginning of what it means to be a woman here. If you're lucky, you're born into a household with a strong male protector. Father, older brother, someone to claim you as theirs. Because without that, you're at the mercy of society's cruel math. Woman alone equals someone else's problem. Or property, or prey. Most girls are married off young, like really young, 14, sometimes younger, especially if you're from a poor family that can't afford to feed all its children. Marriage isn't about love. It's about land, alliances, livestock, and survival. Love comes later, maybe, often not. Your husband might be a boy your age. More likely he's twice your age and already smells like turnip wine and regret. But he has a cow. So, congratulations, you're now a wife. And what does a wife do? Everything. You fetch water, raise children, mend clothing, brew beer, make candles, tend the garden, slaughter chickens, cook every meal, and still find time to be blamed for the weather, the harvest, and any male discomfort within a 100-foot radius. Your body isn't really yours, not in any legal or social sense. Marital consent? That concept doesn't exist yet. If your husband wants you, he takes you. If he doesn't, he might still take you, just with more ale and less eye contact. And if you dare complain, you are labeled a nag, or worse, a witch. Oh yes, witches. That delightful catch-all accusation for women who know herbs, speak their minds, or just happen to be disliked by someone with influence. Got a neighbor who's jealous of your cabbage patch? She might claim you cursed her goat. Congratulations, you're now suspicious. Historians still argue whether medieval witch trials were as widespread as later centuries, but even the whisper of the word could destroy you. You'd be dunked in a river, stripped and examined for devil marks, or simply beaten and told to confess to crimes you didn't commit. And God help you if you're widowed. Without a husband, you're seen as vulnerable, and not in a poetic way. A single woman is expected to remarry quickly, take in male relatives, or enter a convent. If none of those options are available, you might be forced into servitude, or worse, preyed upon by men who see your status as invitation. The convent isn't always the prison people think it is. For some women, it's the only place they can read, write, and live with a semblance of safety. Nuns often serve as midwives, healers, and scholars. But make no mistake, it's still a cloistered life of strict rules, endless chores, and no personal freedom. Your daughter, if you have one, will walk the same path. Unless, of course, she dies young, which she might. From infection, from childbirth, from melancholy, from simply being alive in a world that values her as slightly more useful than a donkey, but slightly less than a plow. And yet, women endure. They laugh, they dance on feast days, they weave stories into their embroidery and pass them down in lullabies. They teach each other how to make nettle tea that eases cramps, how to hide a coin in a hem, how to out-talk a priest without getting excommunicated. There's power in the kitchen, in the herb garden, in the whispers between neighbors at the well. You hear it now, two women chatting nearby, voices low but animated. One is complaining about her husband snoring. The other's advising her to stuff nettles in his straw mattress. It won't help, but it'll make her feel better. Inside the cottage, your host mother is stirring a pot of something thick and bubbling. She wipes her forehead with the back of her wrist and sighs. Her hands are calloused, her knuckles swollen, but her eyes are sharp. You watch her measure herbs with the precision of a physician, and you wonder how many lives she's quietly saved with a pinch of sage or a boiled root. Later in the square, a young girl runs past with a broom twice her size, chasing chickens and shrieking with delight. For a moment, you forget the hard truths. You just see her as she is, wild-haired, barefoot, and full of light. And maybe that's the most quietly radical thing about medieval women. They persist. Through childbirth, through heartbreak, through hunger, through injustice. They sing while working. They cradle the dying. They teach their daughters how to survive the same broken world, one stubborn breath at a time. You walk past the woman from earlier. She's quiet now. The bundle is gone. Her eyes are red, but her spine is straight. Her husband is washing his hands in the trough. Life doesn't pause here, it just limps forward. The sun is sinking low. Another day ending, another day survived. And you think, if you'd been born a woman in medieval times, you probably wouldn't have made it this far. You wake the next morning to the sound of a bell and the thwack of a stick hitting a wooden bucket. That's not a medieval alarm clock. It's your host beating time to wake his kids. And yes, those kids are already working. Because if you thought adult life in the Middle Ages was rough, just wait until you learn what it meant to be a child. You blink, stretch, and nearly trip over a 10-year-old shoveling ashes from the hearth. She gives you a flat look. No one gets to sleep in. In this world, childhood is not a golden age. It's more like a short hallway that dumps you straight into adulthood without warning. There are no birthday parties, no cartoons, no gap years. Just chores, blisters, and maybe, if you're one of the lucky ones, a doll made from a corn husk and some leftover buttons. The toddler in the corner is chewing on a bit of bark. Everyone's too busy to stop him. His older brother, maybe 7 or 8, is outside lugging a bucket of water from the well, his arms shaking with effort. And you just try to stay out of the way. You step into the morning light, and there they are, tiny workers in oversized tunics, sweeping porches, gathering eggs, collecting kindling. They're missing teeth, covered in dirt, and already sweating. If any of them live long enough to be 12, it'll be a miracle. Infant mortality is high, really high. Maybe a third of kids never make it past 5. Fevers, bad food, infected scrapes, anything can be fatal. There's no antibiotics, no bandages beyond strips of linen, no understanding of germs. One bad winter, one spoiled meal, one cough that turns into something worse, and that's it. Even for the ones who survive, life isn't easy. Education? Only if you're rich, male, and preferably connected to the church. A peasant child might learn a few basic prayers and how to count goats. Literacy? Forget it. You'd have a better chance learning to juggle fire while blindfolded. The church controls knowledge, and it's not keen on sharing. And yet, you hear them laugh. A group of boys is rolling a wooden hoop down the road with a stick. They chase it like it's made of gold. One of them trips and lands face first in a pile of questionable mud. They howl with laughter. Kids still find joy, even here. Historians still argue whether childhood, as we understand it, even existed in the Middle Ages. Some say children were treated like small adults, working, punished, and married off early. Others argue they had more freedom, more community, more play than we assume. The truth? Probably somewhere in the filthy, scraped-up middle. You watch a girl of maybe 9 help her mother with a spinning wheel. Her fingers are nimble, her brow furrowed. She's learning a skill that'll feed her for life, if she lives that long. Beside her, a toddler naps on a bundle of hay, a cat curled up on his back like a tiny judgmental guardian. There's no concept of adolescence. One day you're chasing frogs, the next you're betrothed. If you're a boy, you might start working full-time in the fields by 10 or 12. If you're a girl, you're taught to cook, sew, and prepare for the joyless miracle that is childbirth. And speaking of childbirth, young marriages are common. A 13-year-old girl could be a wife. A 14-year-old boy could be a father. It's not just acceptable, it's expected. Because life expectancy is short, and the sooner you start making heirs, the better. Never mind that your hips haven't finished growing. You see a skinny lad dragging a bundle of sticks twice his size. He's coughing. Not a little, the kind of cough that echoes. You walk over, ask if he's all right. He shrugs. Had it since winter, he says. Ma says it's just in the lungs. You pat his back. It rattles. Children are expected to endure. There's no room for weakness, whining, or naps. Unless you're rich. Rich kids have tutors, pets, wooden toys, and actual beds. They also wear miniature versions of adult clothes. Tiny gowns and hats, little shoes with buttons. They're sometimes spoiled rotten and sometimes ignored entirely by their wet nurses. Either way, it's a different world. But most children live like the ones around you, hungry, hardworking, and hopeful. They chase chickens, they wrestle in the dirt, they tie bits of string to rocks and call it a game. They don't dream of becoming astronauts or influencers. They dream of surviving the winter with all their fingers. You sit down on a log as a little girl approaches with a bundle of herbs. She holds it out solemnly. For the goats, she says. You nod, take it, and she skips off. You're not sure if it was a gift or an errand she didn't feel like finishing. Either way, it's yours now. Lunch is served, which is to say a bowl of thin cabbage soup and a hunk of bread the consistency of limestone. The children eat in silence. They've learned to chew carefully. One broken tooth, and you're in for weeks of misery. A toddler throws a spoon. His mother whacks him lightly with the ladle. No one reacts. Discipline is fast, firm, and never up for debate. There's no such thing as time out. Just don't do that again, or next time it's the switch. One boy, maybe 6, wanders off and comes back with a frog in his hand. He holds it up like a prize. His sister screams. Their grandmother cackles. You can't help but laugh. Later, you watch 2 girls make dolls from scraps of cloth. One of them ties straw into the doll's hair and whispers that this one's name is Maud, and Maud is magic. You nod solemnly. Magic is rare around here and often punishable, but if anyone's allowed to believe in it, it's her. Evening falls. The children curl up wherever they can, under tables, beside fire pits, across laps. There's no concept of bedtime routines. They sleep when they're tired. They wake when the rooster screams. Some of them dream, most just rest. You sit by the fire, the tiny weight of the day settling on your shoulders, and you realize childhood isn't lost here. It's just different. Bruised, a little filthy, but still alive, still laughing. And in the darkness, as the stars prick through the thatch roof like icy needles, you hear it again. A lullaby. Soft, hummed by a tired mother to a soot-smudged face. It's tuneless, repetitive, kind. It's not much, but it's something. The market is open. You smell it before you see it. The air is thick with roasting onions, unwashed bodies, livestock sweat, old bread, fermented turnip juice, and something that might be a dead eel. It's a carnival of odors, and if you're not holding your breath, you're learning to live with it. You step onto the muddy path that doubles as your village's central marketplace. A rough square, a few leaning carts, one stall half covered with a ragged sheet, and at least one goat tied to the same post as last week. This is where commerce happens, where fortunes are made, by which we mean someone successfully trades a bundle of leeks for a mostly intact mug. The first thing that hits you isn't a price or a shout, it's a chicken, literally. Someone's escaped hen flaps directly into your chest before sprinting off in a whirlwind of feathers and chaos. No one apologizes. Someone yells, "Catch it!" No one does. A man to your left hawks onions from a wooden crate. They're soft and not in a good way. "Best in the Shire," he lies. Another man nearby slaps a fish onto a board with a wet thwack. The fish has seen better days, possibly last month, possibly in a dream. You wander further in, dodging a woman with an armful of cabbages. She drops one, you pick it up. She squints at you and mutters something that sounds like a blessing or a curse, hard to tell. And then come the deals. Bartering is the lifeblood here. No one uses coins unless you're rich or dealing with outsiders. You want a comb? That'll cost 2 eggs and half a candle. You want a pair of socks? 3 onions and a story. Yes, really, the Weaver likes stories, and the more dramatic, the better. Bonus points if someone dies or cries. You try to trade a small carved trinket, something you found in a field last week. The peddler examines it, sniffs it, why, and then offers a single beat. You protest. He shrugs. That's a beat more than it's worth. You take the deal. Historians still argue how complex medieval village markets actually were. Some claim they were lively hubs of regional trade. Others believe they were more like glorified garage sales with pigs. The truth seems to sit somewhere in between, a bit of everything and always a bit smelly. Children dart between stalls with sticky fingers. A boy pockets a small apple. The vendor sees him but doesn't chase. He just sighs. That boy probably stole from him last week too. There's a makeshift booth selling wool. The spinner has rough hands and no teeth, but she knows exactly what she's doing. You run your fingers across the fabric. It's coarse, rough, slightly damp. She slaps your hand away. Looking costs extra, she says. Nearby, a traveling tinker sharpens blades on a wheel attached to his cart. Sparks fly as he grinds a knife edge for a woman holding a cleaver. You pretend not to notice her expression. You do not ask questions in the medieval market. And then you see it, a peddler with a table of foreign goods, a broken comb made of bone, a bent copper spoon, a bottle of something labeled in Latin. You point to it. He leans in close. This, he whispers, this is a healing tonic from the East. Will fix your humors, balance your bile, even calm bad spirits. You nod solemnly. What's in it? He blinks, mostly vinegar. You walk away. In the center of the market, a man has set up a small puppet stage. He shouts crude rhymes while two wooden knights slap each other with floppy swords. The crowd loves it. Children cheer. A drunk man heckles the puppet. The puppeteer calls him a goat-faced carrot thief. Everyone laughs, especially the goat-faced carrot thief. You pass a woman selling dyed ribbons. The colors are dull but vibrant by medieval standards. Muted blue, smoky red, something that might be yellow. She offers you a scrap for one of your shoelaces. You agree. You now have a ribbon. You do not have a shoelace. A monk stands on a crate nearby, preaching about sin and salvation. People mostly ignore him. You try to listen but get distracted by a man selling questionable pies. Meat? Fruit? You don't ask. You buy one. It's hot, flaky, and tastes like regret. As you chew, someone tugs your sleeve. A girl, 10, maybe younger, holds up a carved whistle. For sale, she says. One story, not too sad. You kneel. You tell her the tale of a knight who fell in love with a goose. She gives you the whistle and walks away smiling. You're not sure who got the better deal. Later, you overhear an argument. Two men fighting over a pig. One says it's his. The other says it wandered into his field. Therefore, it became his. They shout. They threaten. Finally, a third man flips a coin. The pig runs off. Nobody wins. You stop at a cart offering something that looks like honey but smells like socks. New syrup, the seller says proudly, made from turnip sap. You back away slowly. A woman offers to tell your fortune using a bowl of dirty water and a chicken bone. You accept because why not? She stirs, squints, and announces that you'll fall in love with someone who hates turnips. You laugh. She does not. The market begins to wind down as the sun dips low. Stalls are packed up, unsold goods stashed, and vendors trudge home. Some are richer than they were this morning, most are not. A few just enjoy the routine, the noise, the faces, the brief illusion of possibility. You sit on a barrel, ribbon tied around your wrist, whistle in your pocket, pie still lurking in your gut like a questionable memory. The market is more than a place to trade. It's the village's heartbeat, where gossip spreads, where alliances form, where you can feel just for a moment like something is happening. And for peasants with little else to look forward to, that's everything. You walk home under a purple sky, the scent of smoke and onions following you like a shadow. A child runs past with a cabbage. A rooster crows at absolutely nothing. And somewhere behind you, someone yells, "That's my ribbon." You don't turn around, you walk faster. You wake up with something in your eye and something much worse in your toe. You look down and, yup, the toe is twice its usual size in a very suspicious shade of purple. You vaguely remember stubbing it yesterday during your brilliant attempt to catch a runaway goose. You ignored it, of course. That's what people do here. But now it's angry, swollen, and warm. In modern times, you'd ice it, elevate it, and maybe get some antibiotics. But in the Middle Ages, you do what everyone does when their body rebels. You head for the barber surgeon. Yes, barber surgeon, that's one person. One terrifying, multitasking individual who might cut your hair, pull your teeth, and amputate your leg, all before lunch. You limp your way to the edge of the village, where the barber surgeon operates out of a lean-to attached to a barn. There's a faded sign, a painted arm with a red line through it. Cheerful, he's sharpening a knife when you arrive, whistling. The blade gleams in the sun. You try to smile. I think my toe's infected. He nods, barely looking. Probably. Then he yells for his apprentice, a boy who can't be older than 12 but already has the blank stare of someone who's seen too many toes. They usher you inside. It's not a clinic. It's a wooden chair and a box of questionable tools. Rusty scissors, bone saws, leeches in a jar, a bucket of what might be wine or possibly yesterday's bathwater. You sit down. He takes a look. Could lance it, he says, or leech it. You blink. Which is better? He shrugs. Depends how you feel about leeches. You hesitate, and he's already tying a leather strap around your ankle. Lancing it is. He sterilizes the knife with flame, not because he knows about germs, but because he believes fire scares the evil humors. You bite down on a stick someone hands you. The blade comes down, quick, sharp, awful. You scream through the stick. The toe spurses. You must serve. The barber nods, satisfied. That'll help. Then he smears something that smells like garlic and ashes onto it and wraps it in cloth that was probably clean once. You're woozy, sweaty, a little in love with the idea of lying down forever, but he's already done. Don't walk on it too much, he says, which is funny because you live in a time when walking is the only transportation. You limp out, lighter by one infection and a bit of your dignity. People in the village glance at your foot and nod with mild sympathy. Everyone's had something lanced, fingers, knees, cheeks. There's always something going wrong and always a blade to set it right. Historians still debate how effective medieval medicine really was. Some say it was laughably bad, equal parts guesswork and superstition. Others argue that herbal remedies, if prepared correctly, could be surprisingly effective. And it's true, not every potion was poison. Your host grandmother has a shelf lined with dried plants. Sage for fever, yarrow for bleeding, chamomile for sleep. She doesn't call herself a healer, she just knows things, passed down from her mother and her mother's mother. That kind of knowledge lives in quiet corners and smells like thyme and smoke. You spend the rest of the day resting on a bench outside. The sun is kind, a breeze finds you. You try to nap, but every time your foot twitches, you wake up with a grunt. Children run past. Someone's dog pees very close to your other shoe. You sigh. A woman approaches and offers you a drink from her flask. You accept. It's bitter. What is it, you ask? Willow bark tea, she says. Good for pain. It is. Kind of. Also good for making you burp leaves. Late in the day, you hear shouting. A man has broken his arm falling off a cart. People gather. The barber surgeon appears, looking excited. You hobble over, curious. The arm is bent the wrong way. It's awful. He ties it between two boards with strips of cloth and says, "Try not to move." The man whimpers. The barber gives him a sip of something strong. Possibly brandy, possibly lamp oil. The man passes out. Best way to heal, the barber says. You glance at his tools again. There's a purium. You try not to think about it, but if someone gets really sick, fever, shaking, blood in their cough, they call the priest, not the doctor. The priest brings last rites, because once the bad air gets you, your chances plummet fast. They blame miasmas for illness, bad smells carrying disease through the air, which, to be fair, isn't entirely wrong. The village does smell awful, and people are sick a lot. You don't argue the science. You remember stories of plague years, villages where half the population died, graves dug so fast no names were carved, people buried in their clothes, rats everywhere. You shudder. Thank goodness it's not a plague year. Still, you've seen enough wounds and coughs to know this place is barely holding together. And yet, people keep living. They laugh, they patch wounds with moss and honey, they survive. You glance at your bandaged toe, it throbs like it's composing its own music. You hum along. Evening falls. Your host offers you soup and a seat by the fire. You accept both. The soup tastes like boiled sadness with a hint of onion. But it's warm. Someone plays a lute in the corner, badly. No one minds. You sip another cup of willow bark tea and watch the flames flicker. Medicine here is brutal, simple, and occasionally wise. Not because they understood how bodies worked, but because they had no other choice. And you think, as you drift off with your throbbing toe elevated on a log, surviving medieval medicine isn't about health, it's about luck. And tonight, weirdly, you feel lucky. The next morning starts with the shrill clang of the church bell, echoing off the low, lichen-covered walls of your village. It's not even light out. Roosters are still confused, but that sound means one thing: it's time for mass. Everyone stirs, even the chickens seem solemn. You pull your cloak tight, hobble on your bandaged foot, and follow the stream of half-awake villagers toward the squat stone church at the center of town. It's the one building made of real stone, aside from the Lord's Manor. That tells you how important it is. And oh, it is. The church in the Middle Ages isn't just a place for spiritual comfort. It's the law, the school, the record keeper, the judge, the philosopher, the tax office, the source of miracles, and the place you fear if you think too hard about anything. It is quite literally God's middle manager. You step inside and the cold wraps around you like wet linen. The air smells of candle wax, damp earth, and centuries of whispered confession. It's dark except for a few flickering tapers stuck into iron holders. Smoke curls upward, disappearing into the black beams overhead. The priest stands at the front in heavy robes, speaking Latin no one understands. He might be saying a blessing, he might be listing turnip prices. Everyone bows anyway. You do too. This isn't about understanding, it's about obedience. You look around at the bowed heads, your neighbors, your host family, the pig farmer who hasn't changed his tunic since last Tuesday. No one questions being here. Mass is as much a part of survival as bread or boots. Miss too many, and people notice. Miss often enough, and you're troubled. The kind of trouble that ends with an awkward visit from a bishop, or worse, the reeve. You mumble along with the responses. You don't know what they mean. No one does. But it's not about knowing. It's about being known. To your community, to the people who will carry your coffin if the barley doesn't grow next spring. And the sermons? They're not exactly gentle pep talks. Today's is about hell, fire, brimstone, eternal suffering. You sit stiffly on the stone bench as the priest describes in loving detail the torments awaiting sinners. You're told your thoughts are watched, your words weighed, your dreams judged, and that God sees everything. Even the spoon you borrowed last week and never gave back. The priest waves a crucifix, his voice rises. Wicked thoughts lead to wicked deeds, he booms. You flinch, thinking about that time you imagined hitting your landlord with a turnip. Just a fantasy, mostly. By the end, you're sure of two things. You're doomed, and you'd better donate something quickly to balance the scales. You drop a dried apple slice into the offering basket. It's all you have. After Mass, the churchyard becomes a swirl of chatter. It's like an awkward medieval mixer. People gossip in hushed tones. Did you hear? The blacksmith's daughter is with child. No husband? Scandal. The priest glances over. The woman's mother hisses and shoos her home. Others ask for blessings. One man kneels and begs the priest to pray for rain. Another whispers about a bad dream. He thinks it was a sign. You think it was too much cabbage. Then there's the matter of confessions. Confession in the Middle Ages is complicated. It's expected. It's sacred. And it's terrifying. You kneel inside a small alcove as the priest listens. You confess that you've stolen bread, spoken ill of your neighbor, maybe had impure thoughts during feast day dancing. He sighs, says something in Latin, tells you to pray 10 Ave Marias, and gives you a firm pat on the shoulder. You feel cleaner. A little, mostly just tired. The church owns land. It owns livestock. It owns you in a roundabout way. It's the largest landholder in Europe, and its influence stretches further than kings. Monasteries collect rents, priests settle disputes, bishops crown rulers, and yet it also feeds the poor, cares for orphans, and runs infirmaries. You're not sure if it's a blessing or a bureaucracy, probably both. Historians still argue whether medieval religion offered comfort or just control. Some say it was a source of hope in a brutal world. Others see it as a tool of manipulation, but here's the truth. It's all-consuming. You live in a God-haunted world. Saints are real, miracles happen, and the devil, oh, he's definitely around. You've heard stories. A goat with backwards legs, a woman who spoke in tongues during harvest, a man who walked into the woods and came back, changed. No one explains these things. They're just added to the collective hush of things better left alone. And don't forget indulgences. If you sin big, and you will, you can sometimes buy forgiveness. Not always with money, sometimes with labor or promises or a loaf of very good bread. The church says your soul has a balance sheet. You'd love to see yours, but it's probably written in Latin and hidden in a candle drawer. After services, you help clean the churchyard. It's full of lopsided graves, carved wooden crosses, and mossy stones. You tidy one and read the name. You knew him, died of a fever last spring. You blink and move on. Back home, your host mutters about needing to tithe more. They're already struggling, but to skip tithing is to gamble with your eternal soul. So they set aside a bundle of eggs and a small wheel of cheese. The priest will collect it tomorrow. You sit by the fire and think about heaven, about hell, about the yawning middle where most of life seems to stretch endlessly. You wonder if anyone really feels ready to meet their God. You look at your hands, calloused, dirt-streaked, cracked at the knuckles. You think of the people in the Bible, fishermen, shepherds, tax collectors. They had hands like yours, maybe. Maybe that means something. Then your host bursts in, soaking wet. The priest says there's a holy relic passing through the next village, he says breathlessly. A bone of Saint Ethelbert. You blink. Who? Some saint. Doesn't matter. They say it heals things. We're going tomorrow. You nod. You'll go. Not because you believe it'll fix your toe, but because in a world this uncertain, any promise, no matter how strange, is worth chasing. That night, you say your prayers, reciting words you don't fully understand but say anyway, because they feel like armor. You cross yourself and lie down. Outside, the church bell tolls once more. It doesn't signal anything this time, just lets you know it's still there, watching, listening, like everything else in the Middle Ages. You wake up early, again, and something feels off. Not wrong exactly, just tense. The village is quieter than usual. A rooster crows, but it sounds like even he is holding his breath. You stretch, step outside, and immediately notice the lack of normal. There's no laughter, no clanging of buckets, no half-argued shouting over who stole whose turnips. Instead, people are whispering in little clusters. Heads are close, arms crossed, eyes darting. You follow the current of murmurs to the edge of the square. That's when you see it, the stocks. 2 thick wooden beams mounted waist-high on a platform with 3 round holes for a neck and wrists. Usually empty, today they're occupied. A man you vaguely recognize, middle-aged, balding with the kind of face you forget after 5 minutes, is locked inside. His tunic is muddy and torn, and there's a fresh welt on his cheek. Someone's thrown a cabbage at him. It didn't miss. You turn to a nearby woman, eyebrows raised. He stole from the reeve, she says flatly. 3 eggs and a spoon. You wince, not because the crime is so great, but because you know what the punishment means. The public shame, the stink, the itching, the cold, and the cabbage throwing. That never stops. In the Middle Ages, justice isn't about trials and lawyers and 12 peers of your village. It's about punishment everyone can see. You steal, you get locked up. You lie, you get dunked in a river. You gossip too loudly. The priest might drag you to the front of the congregation for a correction. Today's punishment is stocks. Tomorrow's might be a whipping, or a fine, or losing your ear, literally. You make your way back through the village with your eyes peeled. Because here's the thing, crime isn't always about what you do, it's about who catches you. You remember a boy last spring who accidentally broke a baker's window with a rock. The baker didn't punish him. They laughed, patched it with a board, and called it done. But when the same boy borrowed a pie without asking, oh, then it was a whole ordeal. Punishment is part legal, part luck. You hear the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. You follow it, and sure enough, he's working on more shackles. "Demand's gone up," he mutters. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. People are cold. People are hungry. They do stupid things. You nod. Hunger makes criminals of anyone. You remember last winter? One man cut down a tree from the Lord's private grove just to burn it for warmth. They fined him so heavily he had to sell his only pig, the pig that would have kept his family alive until spring. But rules are rules, especially when they serve the people with swords. Historians still argue whether medieval justice was truly cruel or just different. Some say punishments were harsh to discourage crime. Others argue they were theater, public lessons in obedience. Either way, if you mess up here, you don't go to court. You go to the square. And if you're really unlucky, you go to the gallows. You've never seen an execution in person, but you've heard stories. A thief hanged for stealing from the church. A woman burned for witchcraft, though everyone agrees she just had too many cats. A man who insulted a baron and mysteriously fell off a tower. Justice? Maybe. Maybe not. Back at the stocks, children are throwing things now. Mostly old vegetables. One boy has impeccable aim. The man flinches but says nothing. That's part of the game. No begging, no crying, just enduring. Your host joins you, muttering, "Won't be the last this season." You nod. Everyone's tense. The harvest was bad. Grain's running low. People get desperate. You shift nervously. You've bartered. You've maybe borrowed things that weren't exactly yours. You think of the dried fig you took from the market 2 days ago. No one saw, right? You glance around, just to be sure. Then you hear someone shout. You turn just in time to see a young woman being dragged into the square by the reeve and 2 men. She's yelling, angry, not afraid. She lied about the bread? Someone hisses nearby. You listen closely. She sold loaves that were half sawdust, claimed they were whole grain. People got sick. No one died, but some did have uncomfortable evenings. Still, she's in trouble. They argue. She denies it. The reeve raises a stick. Then something strange happens. An old man steps forward, then another woman, then a third. They say she's honest. They say the bread was real. They say she helps the poor, gives to the church, tends the sick. You watch, fascinated. This is rare, public defense, not unheard of, but risky. You speak too loudly and the reeve might decide you're next. Eventually the priest steps in, he listens, he frowns, then he nods. No punishment. This time. The crowd murmurs. The woman is released. She glares at the reeve, then disappears down the lane. You breathe out slowly. Sometimes justice bends, sometimes it doesn't. You return home uneasy, because in this world, punishment isn't always fair. But it is always possible. Evening falls. The man in the stocks is finally released. He limps away, face streaked with cabbage juice and shame. And you tuck your contraband fig a little deeper in your pouch, just in case. It's evening now, the sun's gone soft, orange light pooling at the edges of roofs and fences. You'd think things would settle, quiet down, maybe even turn romantic. They don't. Because love in the Middle Ages is a logistical nightmare. And lust, that's an even riskier business. Dangerous, itchy, and often involving people named something like Egbert or Mildgith. You stroll past a couple leaning against a wooden post, hands barely touching, talking quietly in the kind of coded language people use when their entire community is 5 steps away and gossip travels faster than fire. You pretend not to notice, but everyone does. Because in a village this small, every romance is public. Every flirtation becomes community theater. Courtship is supervised, whispered, and usually squashed by someone's aunt before it goes anywhere interesting. Marriage isn't about love, it's about land, property, dowries, cow exchange rates. A good match means your family keeps its plot and maybe gets a new goat. A bad one means rumors, debts, and your children being called half-wits by neighbors who still believe personality is inherited like cabbage blight. You sit on a stump and watch a young couple walk by, escorted by the girl's little brother, who's clearly been bribed with a boiled sweet to pretend he's not chaperoning. The boy glances over his shoulder every 3 seconds. The girl keeps adjusting her veil. They hold hands for precisely 2 seconds when no one's looking. It's the closest thing to passion you've seen all week. And yet, people do fall in love. Even in this world of obligations and contracts and stolen glances by the turnip patch, it still happens. You hear it in the songs. You see it in the nervous smiles at the harvest festival. In the way a man sharpens his scythe extra carefully if a certain milkmaid is watching. But love doesn't protect you from lice. You scratch your shoulder absently. It started itching yesterday, and now it's a full-blown colony of little medieval roommates. Everyone has them. It's not even shameful anymore. Some couples actually delouse each other by the fire, quietly, methodically, lovingly. You've never wanted romance less. You remember a story from last week. 2 teenagers caught kissing behind the alehouse. The boy's father made him muck pigsties for a month. The girl's mother cut her hair short so she won't tempt anyone else. She now wears a cap that says more about her family than her sins. And then there's the church. Oh, the church has thoughts about love, about lust, about what you can and cannot do, when you can do it, how many windows should be open while you do it, and which direction your bed must face. Too much pleasure? That's a sin. Too little? Also suspicious. A priest once gave an entire sermon about the dangers of excessive affection. You're still not sure what that means, but it probably includes hand-holding. Marital intimacy is allowed, even encouraged if it's for procreation. Otherwise, you're better off praying it away, or going for a very long walk in the snow until the feeling passes. Historians still debate how passionate medieval relationships really were. Some point to love letters and romantic poetry. Others cite marriage contracts and birth records. One thing's clear, people weren't cold-hearted, just cold, and often sharing a bed with 3 kids, a dog, and a chicken. Privacy was rare. Passion was complicated. You pass the baker's wife on the road. She's got flour on her nose and a gleam in her eye. Her husband trails behind, carrying a basket of loaves and pretending not to hear her humming a rather indecent tune. You smirk. They've been married 20 years. They still flirt like they're teenagers. It's weirdly encouraging. Back at your host's house, the eldest daughter is brushing her hair by the fire. She's singing, something soft, something old. Her mother is weaving, her father is snoring. You hear laughter outside, a boy calling out in the dark, "I brought you a pear." A girl replying, "It better not be rotten this time." You sit by the hearth and think about what love means here. It's not flowers and chocolates. It's making sure your partner's boots don't have holes. It's saving them the last bit of cheese. It's picking lice off their neck without complaining. It's knowing they might die young and still choosing to hold their hand anyway. It's less poetry, more potatoes. Less swooning, more stitching. But there's still sweetness. A couple dances slowly during a feast, offbeat and barefoot. A man carves a heart into a fence post with his wife's initials. A girl blushes so hard she drops her entire pail of milk when the Reeves' son says hello. Love lives here, quietly, cautiously, often with poor hygiene. And lust? Well, let's just say the hayloft gets more traffic than the church some evenings. Scandal happens. Secret babies happen. Affairs happen, especially when someone's spouse is off at war or mysteriously bedridden during planting season. People gossip, heads shake, but life goes on. You lean back and watch the fire crackle. Outside, crickets chirp, someone's singing again, something about a maiden and a sailor and a very inconvenient ladder. You smile, because for all its awkwardness and rules and cabbage-scented kisses, medieval romance is very much alive. It's just scratchier than you'd like. It's dinner time, again. You'd think your body would be used to it by now, the rhythm, the hunger, the strange flavors. But as you sit on the worn bench and peer into your bowl, your stomach lurches in protest. It's the same as yesterday, and the day before that. Possibly the same batch, actually. Tonight's supper is a grayish pottage. You're not sure what's in it. Some root vegetables, a few wilted greens, possibly a bean, maybe 2. It smells faintly of old socks and ambition. You reach for a hunk of bread to mop it up. The bread's hard enough to defend yourself with. It could definitely chip a tooth if it catches you at the wrong angle. You chew slowly, cautiously. Somewhere in the village, a rooster screams. You're not sure if that's meaningful or just emotional poultry. Dinner in a medieval peasant home is a communal affair. Everyone gathers, family, guests, even the neighbor's child who just keeps showing up. The table is low, often just a board across barrels or stumps. You sit shoulder to shoulder with people you've worked beside all day. And if you're lucky, everyone's too tired to bicker. Tonight, your host family passes around a crock of something brown and gelatinous. You politely decline. You've seen it before. Last time it moved. Meat is rare. When it appears, it's usually a scrap, fatty, chewy, and attached to a bone you're expected to gnaw clean. Tonight there's a surprise, a small piece of bacon rind. It's passed around reverently, like a relic. You get one bite. It's salty, smoky, and gone too fast. A boy belches. His sister smacks him. He smacks her back. Their mother scolds both while buttering a piece of bread with something that might be lard or maybe old pudding. You don't ask, you're still chewing. The drink of choice? Always ale, weak, warm, and barely fizzy, but again, safer than water and stronger than your willpower at this point. Someone coughs, a spoon clatters. The fire crackles. That's dinner ambience. No forks, just spoons, fingers, and torn bread crusts. If you drop something, you leave it. The dog will get it, or the baby, possibly both. There's a pot in the corner for scraps, not compost, soup tomorrow. You look around and wonder, how does anyone stay alive eating like this? Historians still debate the actual nutrition levels of medieval diets. Some say peasants were lean but healthy. Others argue that chronic malnutrition was rampant, especially in winter, during famines or after bad harvests. What's clear is that every calorie counts, and variety is not on the menu. You think about what a good meal means here. Maybe a stew with rabbit, a fresh apple, a hunk of soft cheese that hasn't gone blue. Maybe bread made from wheat, not barley. That's a feast. And a real feast, you've seen one once. It was when the Lord returned from a victorious skirmish. Read, someone else's field got burned and he took the credit. There was dancing, music, and meat. Real meat. Chickens, sausages, a whole roasted pig with an apple in its mouth. Tables creaked under the weight. You cried a little into your trencher, then ate your trencher. Trencher, a plate made of bread that you eat after the meal, or during, or instead of the meal, depending on your luck. Tonight, though, there are no pigs, no apples, just cabbage, barley, and hope. Someone nearby starts telling a story. It's about a man who dreamed of a meal so fine, his pillow drooled. By the end, everyone is laughing and hungrier. You pull out the whistle you traded for last week. You offer it to the youngest child. She shrieks in delight. It buys you the last crust of bread without even asking. That's dinner currency. As the meal winds down, bowls are scraped clean with fingers, spoons licked, crumbs collected. Nothing is wasted. Even the leftover pottage is carefully poured into a cracked pot for tomorrow's breakfast. You briefly consider accidentally knocking it over. You don't. You're not a monster. The dog whines for scraps. Someone tosses it a bone. It gnaws happily and farts audibly. Everyone groans, except the dog. The dog is living its best life. After supper, there's no dishwasher, no garbage disposal, just elbows and rinse buckets. You help carry the bowls outside. The water is cold, your hands ache, but you scrub anyway. Later, everyone gathers by the hearth, full-ish, quiet, content enough. You sip the last of your ale and lean back, letting the warmth soak into your sore bones. And that's when someone burps the alphabet, or tries to. They get to D and choke on a bit of onion. Laughter erupts. It echoes off the walls, up into the rafters, through the smoke-stained beams. You laugh too, mouth still tasting of cabbage and stale barley, stomach doing complicated math about whether it's satisfied or simply too tired to care. You think of food differently now. You think of salt as treasure. You think of fat as luxury. You think of hot soup as mercy in liquid form. You lie down that night with your belly just full enough and a strange, gentle pride that you've endured another medieval meal. Barely. Night falls hard and fast in the Middle Ages. There are no street lamps, no neon signs, no headlights. Once the sun dips behind the thatched rooftops and the last candle is pinched out, the world becomes black. Truly black. The kind that presses up against your face like a heavy wool curtain. You can't see your hand in front of you. You can barely see the fear inside you, but you can hear it. Because medieval night is loud in a different way. You lie down on your straw-stuffed mat beside the hearth. The fire's almost out, just glowing embers, red as toothaches. The hut creaks and settles, wood shifting like it's exhaling. Somewhere outside, an owl calls, a dog barks once, then silence, then a scream. You freeze, not a long scream, just a sharp, surprised yelp, then shuffling, then nothing. You want to ask what it was, you really do, but no one else moves, no one even opens their eyes. In this world, if something screams in the dark and it isn't screaming right at you, you let it be. Because darkness here isn't empty, it's full of dangers real and imagined. Thieves, wolves, spirits, angry neighbors, restless souls. Your cousin's cousin swears he saw a monk-shaped shadow gliding past the graveyard. Could have been grief, could have been something worse. You roll over, the straw pokes through the cloth and jabs your ribs. You scratch absent-mindedly at a flea bite, or maybe a dozen. You've stopped keeping count, and still something scurries. Rats, every home has them. They're part of the furniture. You've named yours. Tonight, Gregory is especially active. He squeaks by the hearth, possibly dragging away a scrap of dried beet. You hope it was meant for him. You really do. The family dog lifts its head, growls low, then flops back down. Not worth it. You agree. Outside, the wind picks up. It howls through the gaps in the shutters, rattling them like bones. You pull your blanket tighter. Wool, scratchy, probably last washed during the last coronation. It smells like sleep and smoke and decades of fatigue. And you're not really alone, because this is when the stories come out. In the dark, people talk in whispers about ghosts, about highwaymen with cursed knives, about the old woman who lives near the woods and never ages, about the horse that returns riderless every St. Bridget's Eve, about the thing with no face that stares into your window unless you leave a bowl of milk outside. You pretend to sleep, but you listen. Someone farts, it echoes. Someone giggles, just for a second, then silence again. The night is long, especially in winter. You dream of warmth, of summer nights when the air is thick with gnats and songs instead of frost and warnings. Because the truth is, the dark here doesn't feel natural. It feels like punishment, like being locked out of God's light. You're supposed to sleep, yes, but also to pray, to endure, to survive until dawn. Thieves travel at night. So do lovers. So do messengers and fugitives. If someone knocks on your door past midnight, you don't open it unless you know the exact name of their grandmother's awing and how they like their barley boiled. Every once in a while, a stranger sleeps in the village square. When that happens, the reeve comes early to poke them with a stick and ask uncomfortable questions. You think about that knock, that shadow, that noise under the floorboards. You breathe in, you breathe out, and then a voice. "Are you awake?" someone whispers. You don't answer. "Just checking," they say. You lie still, eyes wide. Eventually you sleep, fitfully, dreaming of things that smell like rot and bread and fear. You twitch, you mumble. You wake with a start to the sound of hoofbeats, or maybe thunder. Historians still argue what people feared most at night in the Middle Ages. Was it wolves, demons, bandits? Each culture had its own darkness. In Northern Europe, it was black dogs and forest spirits. In France, it was the Ankou, a skeletal reaper. In England, maybe the devil himself walked the moors at night with hooves and a book of names. But what you fear is everything. You hear your host stirring, he's muttering something in Latin, a prayer, a curse, a hope. You don't ask, you just turn over and try again. Sleep comes slowly, like honey poured through a colander. Eventually, the fire goes out. The dog stops snoring. The rats fall silent. And then finally, your breath evens. Your shoulders loosen. You sleep until something brushes your foot. You wake up with a start, leg twitching from the ghost of last night's phantom foot brush. Was it a rat? A dream? Something unspeakable from folklore? You don't know. You don't ask. You just lie there blinking, breath shallow, waiting for the light to change from black to blue. And when it does, when morning finally seeps in through the cracks in the wall, it hits you. You made it. You survived a full day in the Middle Ages. Barely. Probably with lice, possibly with early stage scurvy, but you're here. You sit up slowly. Everything hurts. Muscles you didn't know you had feel like they were individually stomped by a mule. Your hands are sore, your feet are puffy, your stomach's already growling even though it barely digested last night's cabbage glue. You look around at the others, still asleep, curled like commas around the fire's cold ashes. A child snores softly. Someone else mumbles in their sleep. The dog stretches and kicks its leg like it's chasing medieval rabbits. The hearth is dark. You're going to have to light it again. Blowing on coals, nursing the spark, coaxing flame from smoke-stained sticks. Another endless, aching morning ahead. But something's different now. You know this rhythm, this brutal, muddy, lice-picking, grain-scraping life. You've hauled water. You've bartered for half a beat. You've had your toe stabbed by a man who also does haircuts. You've eaten bread so dense, it might be classified as a building material. And still, you've lived it. You step outside, the sky is pale gray, not sunny, not storming, just vaguely hopeful. Somewhere a rooster howls. A woman dumps a chamber pot into the ditch. A donkey coughs. Normal. And normal is the point. You nod at the man walking past with a cart full of hay. He doesn't say anything, but there's a flicker of recognition. You belong here now, in your own damp, hungry, exhausted way. The village comes alive slowly. Clatters, thuds, the chime of a hammer, the bark of a dog. You fall into the flow, your body already anticipating chores before your brain is fully on. Someone hands you a wooden bowl, pottage again. You don't even flinch this time. Later, you spot the same boy trying to chase the same runaway chicken. They both look tired. The chicken wins again. Someone sings a verse of an old folk tune about a girl who married a goat. It makes very little sense, but everyone joins in anyway. Off-key, loud, joyful in the way only the poor and absurdly tired can be, because joy survives here somehow. It lives in dance steps at a feast, in stolen apples, in whispered jokes while weaving baskets. It lives in spoon games and flirtations by the well, in overly enthusiastic farting contests between shepherds. It lives because it has to. Without it, the weight of survival would crack this world in two. So when the church bell rings again, marking another hour, another chore, another call to obedience, you don't dread it. You just stand up, shake out your legs, roll your sore shoulders, and walk forward. You still smell like smoke and turnip. You're still itchy in places you cannot politely scratch. But you know how to face the day, because now you understand. The Middle Ages aren't just kings and knights and castles. They're also muddy fields, sore knees, misfiring bread loaves, and the stubborn heartbeat of people too tired to complain and too practical to quit. It's loud, it's messy, it's painful, but it's also weirdly beautiful. You get through the day, again, somehow. You fix a fence, you help chase a pig, you trade a whistle for half a plum, you smile at a child, you pretend you don't hear the rats. And then, just as the sun slips behind the hills and the sky turns the color of old wool, you return home. You sit by the fire. Someone hands you a scrap of cloth to patch your sleeve. You sew badly, but it holds. A man plays a reed flute. A woman hums. A child dances in a way that's mostly just hopping. And in that flickering firelight, surrounded by soot and soup and sleepiness, you realize something. You made it through medieval times. You did not die. Not from rats or soup or surgery. Not from ghosts or love or the church's 1,000 rules. Not from mud or cabbages or boredom. You lived the life. And now it's time to leave it behind.